I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world, millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!
I am Lucifer, the light bearer. My magnificent gift to humanity is the absolute absence of morality. Nothing restricts me. I transgress every law and pervert the sacred books and constitutions. No religion can contain me. I destroy all theories and cause all dogmas to explode. In the depths of the depths of the depths, no one lives any deeper than I do. I am the source of all abysses. I am the one who gives life to dark grottos, the one who knows the center around which turn all densities. I am the viscosity of everything that vainly attempts to be definite, the supreme strength of magma, the stench that denounces the hypocrisy of values, the carrion mother of every flower, the corrupter of vain minds, swallow imperfection. No peace with thee, no peaceful little home, no candle gospels, no sugar virgin for the clammy tongues of hairy nuns. I'd oily defecate on the leprous birds of morality. myself from imagining the prophet on all fours being mounted by a horny donkey. I am the ecstatic songster of incest and the champion of all the pedigree. The nail of my finger delightedly slides open the belly of an innocent, so I can dip my breath in his stride.
One more river to cross before I lay my burden down. One more river to cross till I'm free from fear.
100 years after the freeing of the slaves, their descendants were still relegated to the lowest rungs of the economic ladder. The Mississippi Delta in the 1960s was the poorest region of the United States, with most of its black population living in abject poverty. Migration to the city did little to change this. In Memphis, most attempts by black workers to organize for decent wages and working conditions were brutally suppressed. With the underpaid black workers still forming the basis of the region's economy, the values of the Old South remained essentially unchanged.
One more river to cross.
During the 1960s, Memphis spared itself the uprisings which drew national attention to Little Rock, Birmingham, and Selma by integrating facilities in a relatively peaceful manner. Blacks were finally admitted to movies, libraries, and lunch counters, but economically, they continued to occupy the most menial jobs for the lowest of wages. Nowhere was this more evident than in the Department of Public Works.
This was a job a white man could not have. It was beneath the level of a white man. This is a social caste. This is a job reserved for blacks. It was not a clean job. They had to wear filthy clothes. They had to work in filth. They had to drag garbage cans. I mean, tubs of garbage.
Most of those tubs had holes in them, garbage leaking all over you. When you got home in the evening, you had to stop at the door to pull off your shoes and pull off those little dirty clothes because maggots had fell all on you.
The men worked long hours with no overtime pay. There were no grievance procedures, no paid vacations, no sick leave. If a man got injured on the job, he could be fired. Wages were so low that a full-time worker could still qualify for welfare.
The lots of residents, they felt that we were satisfied because most of those people would give you little handouts. So we just gotten tired of those handouts. You almost could tell a worker when you saw him in the street. He had a hat on too large, his shoes was too big, his coat was too long. From handouts. You know, we work every day, and let us have the money that we can be able to buy and pick as other people do.
In 1963, T.O. Jones led 32 fellow workers off the job. The city responded by firing them all. Most were eventually rehired, but the point had been made. Union activity would not be tolerated. Jones refused to go back and continued his efforts to organize the men.
You know, he used to tell me, because I used to see all this paperwork and stuff, he would tell me, he said, these people don't realize that they don't have to live like this. They don't realize that if they come together, that they can overcome these little things, you know, although they think they can't win, but they can. You know, it was like he was telling me, convincing me that he was right.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tarot-Rism. We got episode 6. And before, I just want to give a shout out to our First Nations brothers and sisters out in Canada, the Micmac lobster fishermen who are currently being harassed and assaulted by evil Canadian commercial fisheries. I put up this Mohawk flag here in solidarity. So let's start the show. It is my pleasure to invite civil rights hero, Vietnam War veteran, and co-founder of the Invaders organization. Give it up, ladies and gentlemen, for John Burl Smith.
Hey, everybody. How
you doing?
You guys doing today?
All right. So let's continue our conversation from last episode. Yes. So set up the scene for us, John B.
Well, that clip you just showed, the parade, that was the Cotton Carnival Parade. And they started that parade back in the 1920s. And every year, the white people, the money class, would celebrate their year of great production. And it really represents the slave master mentality that existed in Memphis, the leadership. And so there's another statement in that clip where they talk about integration in Memphis, how it happened. And they use the statement that it happened relatively peaceful. And the reason it happened peacefully was because of the so-called black leadership. And it was basically the NAACP. And the leaders in Memphis were accommodationists. They saw themselves as the middlemen, the go-betweens, to work out what white people were willing to give to the black community, and then they would come back to the black community and tell the black people what white people were really willing to give, and accept, and that black people should accept in order to maintain the peace. And so this is the atmosphere that people in Memphis endured at the time of the Sanitation Strike. The Sanitation Strike that happened in February 1968 was the second Sanitation Strike. The first one, where they talk about T.O. Jones and the fact that he got fired because he would not go back to work without an agreement. And T.O. had worked all the way to 1968 trying to get a union in. And the union that the AFS-CME was recognized by the workers. And so they had a union in name only because the city refused to accept the union. And as they said, the sanitation workers were the lowest paid workers in the city. They made, I think, $1.75 an hour. And the city had a policy of, as they say in the clip, about not giving the workers any kind of concession. And one of the things was that if there was inclement weather, and they would send the black workers home without pay, but the white workers could go back to the locker room and sit until the weather got better, or they would get paid for the day. So black workers, because they needed the money, they developed this thing of getting in the back of the truck to get out of the weather. And the day that the strike happened,
we have a picture of the two black workers in the back of a truck, which there we go.
Yes, that was the way they stayed out of it. They had a storm that day. And two workers, just like these guys, were in the back of the truck, and the compactor started up and crushed them both to death. And that's when they all came out on strike. So, and the thing that must be understood about the whole strike situation is that the mayor, Henry Lowe, when they went out on strike, he went into Chancery Court to get an injunction against the strike. And the judge declared the strike illegal, which meant the union could not do anything to help the strike. They couldn't do any kind of demonstrations. If they participated in any activity, then the city could get damages from the union. So the community leaders were the ones that got involved in the strike for the union. And so the union had to work through community leaders, which was basically the NAACP, preachers in Memphis, to actually run the strike. And because they were the ones that ran the strike, it was very like integration. It was very calm. And that was the name of the organization, CALM. And what they did was they would march to City Hall, and they would have, they did a boycott downtown, but it was very ineffective. So the strike really was a strike in name. The guys would not go, refuse to go back to work. And so Lowe said if they didn't come back to work on a particular day, he would fire everybody. And so that's what he did again. He fired all the sanitation workers, and CALM became the instrument to try and get them to settle a deal for the union, and the workers would go back to work. But Loeb said he would not talk to them at all until they went back to work.
And so at this point, you invaded the situation, right? And
well,
we have
there was a meeting at City Hall where the workers were on the way back to the Claiborne Temple where they met every day. And the police cars start bumping into the workers. They knocked a lady down, and she was trapped under the car. And so the workers started beating on the police car, trying to let them know that there was a woman trapped underneath. And so the police started macing and beating on the workers. And this is when the community got involved in the strike as the leaders of the strike. And they would have meetings every night, and we would, the community would come out and listen to the leaders to tell them what to do, try to keep the morale of the workers up. And I started going down to the meetings. This is after we had organized the Invaders. And because I had my Invaders jacket on, and they recognized there was a white minister. He recognized the Invaders jacket, and he wanted to talk. And so I told him about what the Invaders were doing, and he wanted me to come up and speak to the workers.
We got a great picture we can put up there, yeah.
And so that particular night, while I was speaking to them, everybody was kind of, laid back about it. So I wanted to rile the crowd up. And I thought about when the Black Panthers walked into the state legislature in California carrying weapons. And we were in the South, so we couldn't walk in, carry guns and stuff like that. But I figured that if I made the statement that the sanitation workers were really going to have to fight. The load wasn't going to give in, and so they may have to pick up some guns and fight for their rights. And that was one of the most radical statements any of them had heard. And the workers, they loved the statement. And I got a cheer and all of that. But that upset Calm, and they, ushered me off of the stage and, told the workers that I didn't represent anybody, that I was for violence, and they were not for violence. They were for peaceful activities, and they didn't want the invaders involved.
So at this point is when you went ahead and organized the young kids of the garbage workers.
Yeah, well, see, the invaders were already working in Riverside. And so when I came down, they saw me and they were interested. Most of the young people, they were children of the sanitation workers and their friends, and they wanted to get involved in the strike. But like I said, Calm did not want young people involved. They wanted to use the workers who would march every day to City Hall and back. And so I got the kids to understand that they could help their family if we start working in the community. And the first thing I told them was they didn't have to let the garbage trucks just drive through their neighborhood. They could throw bricks at them, they could throw bottles at them, do anything they could to stop the garbage trucks, And of course, they started doing that. And once they started throwing bricks at the garbage truck, the mayor, he assigned police cars to guard the garbage truck. And that let everybody know that, hey, we had a little power because we had forced the mayor to declare a state of emergency in terms of putting police with the garbage trucks. I also told them they could turn the schools out every day. And they started ringing the fire alarm. And that meant the fire trucks had to come out to the schools. And when the fire trucks arrived, they throw bricks at them, they throw bombs, and then run back into school. And this was a way to get the attention of the mayor. And another way was we did what we call traffic stops. And because of the way Memphis is organized, you had the downtown area. Then there was just outside of downtown, all of the neighborhoods that circled the city were black neighborhoods. And then on the other side of the black neighborhoods were white neighborhoods. So that meant the white people driving into the city every day had to pass through black communities to get downtown. So the kids would block up the intersections with garbage trucks or do a makeshift demonstration and hold up traffic. But before the police would get there, they'd run back off into the neighborhood. But that caused gridlock. And that brought even more complaints to Lowe and to, white people were calling the paper talking about, they needed to stop that. And at night, I taught them to make Molotov cocktails, and we would attack white property, rental property, white stores in the black community. And this would make the fire department have to respond. We'd put gas in old tires and light it and roll it down the hills into grassy fields and start grass fires, which meant the fire department had to really stay active almost all night. And this put pressure on Lowe to, negotiate. But of course, he was adamant not to negotiate.
So you were telling me that some of these tactics you actually learned while you were a soldier.
Oh yeah, well, this was when we went before you went to Vietnam. They would have a month-long session on counterinsurgency. The Vietnamese were considered insurgents because the government was Vietnam, but they were against the people. So the people were that fought the local government and the U.S. soldiers were considered insurgents. And the kind of tactics that they were using were the kind of tactics that I was thinking about. And so I saw us doing basically the same thing. We weren't in the jungle, but we knew the ghetto very well. And like I told them, use the back alleys, don't use the streets. At night, use drainage ditches that run through the community to get around, so that, because the police patrol the streets, but they didn't get off into the neighborhoods, and everybody had their little shortcuts through the neighborhood from street to street, and the kids knew that. Plus, people will allow them, hide in the house, because the whole community was a part of it. So if you ran up and knocked on somebody's door, they'd let you in, and the police ride through the neighborhood until they could, so nobody was ever caught or arrested, so they couldn't say exactly who was doing it, although they knew, but they never caught anybody.
Wow. So let's go on to the next part of the show. Now we're going to be analyzing one of Dr. King's speeches about the three evils of society. Let's roll the first part.
We have come because we see this as a dark hour in the affairs of men. For most of us, this is a new mood. We are traditionally the idealists. We are the marchers from Mississippi and Selma and Washington who staked our lives on the American dream during the first half of this decade. Many assembled here campaigned assiduously for Lyndon Johnson in 1964 because we could not stand idly by and watch our nation contaminated by the 18th century policies of Goldwaterism. We were the hardcore activists who were willing to believe that Southerners could be reconstructed in the constitutional image. We were the dreamers of a dream, that dark yesterdays of man's inhumanity to man would soon be transformed into bright tomorrows of justice. Now it is hard to escape the disillusionment of betrayal. Our hopes have been blasted and our dreams have been shattered. The promise of a great society was shipwrecked off the coast of Asia on the dreadful peninsula of Vietnam. The poor black and white, are still perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. What happens to a dream deferred? It leads to bewildering frustration and corroding bitterness. I came to see this in a personal experience here in Chicago last summer. And all the speaking that I have done in the United States before varied audiences, including some hostile whites, the only time that I have ever been booed was one night in our regular weekly mass meeting by some angry young men of our movement. I went home that night with an ugly feeling. Selfishly, I thought of my sufferings and sacrifices over the last 12 years. Why would they boo one so close to them? But as I lay awake thinking, I finally came to myself And I could not for the life of me have less than patience and understanding for those young men. For 12 years, I and others like me had held out radiant promises of progress. I had preached to them about my dream. I had lectured to them about the not too distant day when they would have freedom all here now. I had urged them to have faith in America and in white society. Their hopes had soared. They were now booing me because they felt that we were unable to deliver on our promises. They were booing because we had urged them to have faith in people who had too often proved to be unfaithful. They were now hostile because they were watching the dream that they had so readily accepted turn into a frustrating nightmare. This situation is all the more ominous in view of the rising expectations of men the world over. The deep rumblings that we hear today, the rumbling of discontent, is the thunder of disinherited masses rising from dungeons of oppression to the bright hills of freedom. All over the world, like a fever, freedom is spreading in the widest liberation movement in history. The great masses of people are determined to end the exploitation of their races and lands. And in one majestic chorus, they are singing in the words of our freedom song, "Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around."
All right.
You know, most people think of Dr. King as this very meek and calm guy that they saw speaking at the March on Washington in 1963. And he was a very calm guy, but Dr. King was very radical. And over the period from 63 to 66, 1966, early 67, there were riots all over the United States. And these riots were the result of the kind of frustration that built up in the Black community. Even in Memphis, like that clip you showed of us in the cotton field, that's where my family came from. That was what I was born into. That was the legacy of my family. And this was a legacy for millions of Black people. Those that could escape the South, as my family did, or escape Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia and go north. A lot of those families were living in ghettos in the north. And they had listened to Dr. King talk, as he said. And so when we get to the 1966 ghettos and riots are the result of what he said about the frustration of the promises that had been made with the war on poverty. The war on poverty was supposed to really address the kinds of situations that Black people faced in ghetto. But the war on poverty had turned into a trick bag in that it was a job program for white people. And what Black people got out of it was the crumbs that were left over. And so when you get to 1967 and Dr. King announcing the Poor People's Campaign, that's the result of Black people being tired of handouts and low-paying jobs and dilapidated buildings and that they lived in and apartments. And so we're at a point when Dr. King, this is the point at which Dr. King announces the Poor People's Campaign. He's responding to that, as he said, Black power advocates were upset across the country, but you had people like the ones that were running the sanitation strike in Memphis, who were basically doing business for Loeb, trying to get the sanitation workers to go back to work and trust Loeb to, address their grievances after they go back to work. But on the other hand, we were in the streets as begging them not to go back to work until Loeb actually signs an agreement with them. Because if they went back to work before he signed the agreement, then he would do them like he did them in 1963 when T.O. Jones was the only one that decided not to go back, and he just kept working on his union. And so now when we come to 1968, the rest of the union have realized this, and they are staying out. And the reason that we're doing community type insurgency with firebombs and things like that is to give them the courage to continue to stay out.
Wow, and that's beautiful because it was actually the children of the strikers that were a part of were the invaders, the foot soldiers for the invaders.
Yes, definitely. And I will say this about young people then and young people now. They realize that this is their world. And if they don't do something to change it, it will stay as it is. And the Black Lives Matter movement is made up of the same kind of young people with the same kind of determination now that young people had back then. And I'm just glad that I had a role that I could play back then to help poor people that really needed some leadership, because the leaders, the NAACP and the preachers, they were meeting with Loeb every night after these meetings, and he would tell them what he wanted them to try to do to talk the workers into going back to work. And so everything we were doing was to try and get them to continue to stay out.
All right. So let's go to the next clip of that speech.
And so the collision course is set. The people cry for freedom, and the Congress attempts to legislate repression. Millions, yes, billions, are appropriated for mass murder, but the most meager pittance of foreign aid for international development is crushed in the surge of reaction. Unemployment rages at a major depression level in the black ghettos, but the bipartisan response is an anti-riot bill rather than a serious poverty program. The modest proposals for model cities, rent supplement, and rat control, pitiful as they were to begin with, get caught in the maze of congressional inaction. And I submit to you tonight that a Congress that proves to be more anti-Negro than anti-rat needs to be dismissed. It seems that our legislative assemblies have adopted Nero as their patron saint and are bent on fiddling while our cities burn. Even when the people persist and in the face of great obstacles develop indigenous leadership and self-help approaches to their problems, and finally tread the forest of bureaucracy to obtain existing government funds, The corrupt political order seeks to crush even this beginning of hope. The case of CDGM in Mississippi is the most publicized example, but it is a story repeated many times across our nation. Our own experience here in Chicago is especially painfully present. After an enthusiastic approval by HEW's Department of Adult Education, SCLC began an adult literacy project to aid 1,000 young men and women who have been pushed out of overcrowded ghetto schools in obtaining basically literacy skills prerequisite to receiving jobs. We had an agreement with A&P stores for 750 jobs through SCLC's job program, Operation Breadbasket, and had recruited over 500 pupils the first week. At that point, Congressman Kuczynski and the Daily Machine intervened and demanded that Washington cut off our funds or channel them through the machine-controlled poverty program in Chicago. Now we have no problem with administrative supervision, but we do have a desire to be independent of machine control and the Democratic Party patronage network. For this desire for a politically independent approach to the needs of our brothers, our funds are being stopped as of September 15th, and a very meaningful program discontinued. Yes, the hour is dark. Evil comes forth in the guise of good. It is a time of double talk when men in high places have a high blood pressure of deceptive rhetoric and an anemia of concrete performance.
That's really amazing when he mentions indigenous leadership and self-help approaches to their problems. I mean, at this point, you're finding all these, the Black Panthers had started, treating heroin with acupuncture. In fact, later on in this episode, we're going to see a trailer of a new film by a old friend of mine from Montreal, Mia Donovan, who produced a film about acupuncture and treating heroin addicts. And actually, it was Dr. Mutulu Shakur, Tupac's father, who was involved in that, and is still in prison. So yeah, tell us what you hear from this.
Well, again, we keep going back to where Dr. King had, developed a different perspective on the problem of Black people than most civil rights leaders had. And this is causing a what became known as the divide in civil rights and between Black power, because Dr. King is realizing that the world is changing, that we can no longer depend on the handout of white people. We needed to have structured development that would allow Black people to advance in this society. And today we are facing the same situation with this election. We know that Trump is going to keep doing what he's been doing. Our hope is that Joe Biden understands that there has to be a different direction. And this is, as I said, the same situation that Johnson faced in 1964, 65, coming into 1968, which was an election year. And that year, this is when Dr. King is trying to get the system to understand that we're not going to continue to accept second class. That's really what it amounted to. The black people had to accept less than what white people were enjoying and living. And this is expressing itself in his rhetoric, and it's expressing itself in the sanitation strike. And you have the people who are in charge of the strategy that is directing the sanitation strike, who are committed to the past in terms of the way they wanted to approach the strike. And they're looking at young people, Black Power advocates, as the enemy. And they, what I call, circle their wagons around leadership to keep Black Power advocates from showing a different kind of leadership. And this is why the invaders were accepted as leaders by the workers, but not by the people who were running the strike. And see, at this time, Dr. King, who had announced the Poor People's Campaign back in December, and he had tried to preach to civil rights leaders to get them, to support the Poor People's Campaign, but they refused. So when you get to this period of the sanitation strike, because the sanitation workers were the poor, they were the poorest in the city. And so he saw coming, and getting involved in the sanitation strike as a way of doing two things: helping the sanitation workers and helping the Poor People's Campaign. But the leaders in Memphis did not want him to be involved at this point, because they were the ones that were getting the press conferences. They were the ones who were talking to the press and on TV, and they were the ones looking like big leaders in Memphis. So Dr. King and Reverend Lawson, who was the head of COM, they were acquaintances from when Reverend Lawson worked in Nashville with the sit-in movement up there. So he was calling Reverend Lawson and talking to Reverend Lawson about coming and joining the Poor People's Campaign, but they were holding him off. And it was the fact that we were in the streets demonstrating, firebombing white people's property, burning stores. We were doing whatever we could to bring the attention to the city that we were serious and that we were not going to accept second class. And this is when they have to make a decision about Dr. King.
All right. So let's go on with the next part.
What they truly advocate is socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. I wish that I could say that this is just a passing phase in the cycle of our nation's life. Certainly times of war, times of reaction throughout the society. But I suspect that we are now experiencing the coming to the surface of a triple-pronged sickness that has been lurking within our body politic from its very beginning. That is the sickness of racism, excessive materialism, and militarism. Not only is this our nation's dilemma, it is the plague of Western civilization. As early as 1906, W.E.B. Du Bois prophesied that the problem of the 20th century will be the problem of the color line. Now, as we stand 2/3 into this crucial period of history, we know full well that racism is still that hound of hell which dogs the tracks of our civilization. Ever since the birth of our nation, white America has had a schizophrenic personality on the question of race. She has been torn between selves, a self in which she proudly professed the great principles of democracy, and a self in which she madly practiced the antithesis of democracy. This tragic duality has produced a strange indecisiveness and ambivalence toward the Negro, causing America to take a step backward simultaneously with every step forward on the question of racial justice. To be at once attracted to the Negro and repelled by him, to love and to hate him. And there has never been a solid, unified, and determined thrust to make justice a reality for Afro-Americans. The step backward has a new name today. It is called the white backlash. But the white backlash is nothing new. It is the surfacing of old prejudices, hostilities, and ambivalences that have always been there. It was caused neither by the cry of black power, nor by the unfortunate recent wave of riots in our cities. The white backlash of today is rooted in the same problem that has characterized America ever since the black man landed in chains on the shores of this nation.
I'm curious, John B. You see nowadays when Dr. King's talking about militarization, you see this huge militarization of the police nowadays, and also of, for example, militias and really crazy right-wing organizations. Do you feel that the civil disobedience is a way to help what's going on right now, or do you think that it worsens the situation?
Well, what we're facing today is just a continuation of what Dr. King is talking about. Back in 68, 67, in that place, the war in Vietnam was sucking money, and the Congress was saying they couldn't spend any money on black people, on improving conditions in the ghetto because of the war. Today, it's tax cuts. It's money to restart the economy, and statements like that directs money away from black communities. We have been in this line since emancipation. Our penniless emancipation meant that we started at zero when white people have been making money all along, and they continued to make money through the period when back to that clip with black people in the cotton fields and white people on floats and coming down these stairs looking great. They're celebrating wealth, the wealth that they gained off of black people's back. And the condition hadn't changed. The situation is still today. Today they call them essential workers, but they make the same level of income that the sanitation workers were making in 1968 compared to the level of income that white people are making today. The wealth gap today between black and white is greater than it was in 68. It's greater than it was in the 1930s and 40s. But we're expected to continue to plod along as the base of this society when white people are living great. And the militias, they call them the Ku Klux Klan. They call them slave catchers doing slavery. It hasn't changed. What happened in the 1950s when the Ku Klux Klan disappeared, they joined the police departments. The police departments in America are the new Ku Klux Klan. They just don't wear hoods anymore. They don't have to. They can shoot a black person 7 times. They can kneel on a black man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and everybody see it. But still they try and justify it as for somehow it's the black man's fault. So it's not that it's making it worse. We're just fighting the same fight that we've always fought. White people are trying to pretend that it's something different, like things had changed. I think in 2000, the word was post-racial. You know, everything, we were supposed to have moved past all of that. But here in 2020, it's worse than it was. Police were not killing black people in 1968 the way they're killing black people now. The militarization of the police department is because they're giving them the same, this is the arms industry in America. They're flooding the cities with guns and complaining about black people shooting each other as a reason not to progress. Excuse me. So, no, we haven't changed. We're just doing on the same road.
All right. Let's go move on to the next clip.
This does not imply that all white Americans are racist. Far from it. Many white people have, through a deep moral compulsion, fought long and hard for racial justice. Nor does it mean that America has made no progress in her attempt to cure the body politic of the disease of racism, or that the dogma of racism has not been considerably modified in recent years. However, for the good of America, it is necessary to refute the idea that the dominant ideology in our country, even today, is freedom and equality, while racism is just an occasional departure from the norm on the part of a few bigoted extremists. Racism can well be that corrosive evil that will bring down the curtain on Western civilization. Arnold Toynbee has said that some 26 civilizations have risen upon the face of the earth. Almost all of them have descended into the junk heaps of destruction. The decline and fall of these civilizations, according to Toynbee, was not caused by external invasions, but by internal decay. They failed to respond creatively to the challenges impinging upon them. If America does not respond creatively to the challenge to banish racism, some future historian will have to say that a great civilization died because it lacked the soul and commitment to make justice a reality for all men. The second aspect of our afflicted society is extreme materialism. An Asian writer has portrayed our dilemma in candid terms. He says, "You call your 1,000 material devices labor-saving machinery, yet you are forever busy. With the multiplying of your machinery, you grow increasingly fatigued, anxious, nervous, dissatisfied. Whatever you have, you want more. And wherever you are, you want to go somewhere else. Your devices are neither time-saving nor soul-saving machinery. There are so many sharp spurs which urge you on to invent more machinery and to do more business. This tells us something about our civilization that cannot be cast aside as a prejudiced charge by an Eastern thinker who is jealous of Western prosperity. We cannot escape the indictment. This does not mean that we must turn back the clock of scientific progress. No one can overlook the wonders that science has wrought for our lives. The automobile will not abdicate in favor of the horse and buggy, or the train in favor of the stagecoach, or the tractor in favor of the hand plow, or the scientific method in favor of ignorance and superstition. But our moral lag must be redeemed. When scientific power outruns moral power, we end up with guided missiles and misguided men.
Wow, this really blew my mind, especially when he's referring to devices. You know, about modern technology claiming to save time. I mean, we see what's gone on nowadays with devices, you know, and phones and interference, you know, and fake information being, you know, spread so massively and so quickly.
Yeah. Well, what I look at is the coronavirus. The coronavirus has revealed to the world in terms of the mentality of the president now. He is, as Dr. King is pointing out in his statements, the anti-science, the anti-logic, the anti-progress. And he's really advocating that the train go back to the stagecoach. You know, that with the way in which he's approaching the economy, which means he's saying the same thing about race relations. He's denying that there is a problem. And you can follow history, as we are doing here, just through Dr. King's speech, and know that he's a liar. You know, there's no way for him to say he's the most unracist person, because the fact that he's denying it means that he's a racist.
Right.
The racist will never admit that he's one. It's the people who are unsure or who are questioning that we find hope in. You know, and today, not only COVID-19, but Black Lives Matter has shown, and this is not because it's just black people, but there are white young people, the Native Americans, Hispanics. This is the first time in this country you've had that kind of coming together by the different groups and amalgamation into one movement that says we are not going to accept this. They're not doing it for black people. They're doing it for themselves because they realize this society can't exist white and black. It has to be one society, and everybody has to share in the benefits of this society. It is not something that, like when we began with that parade and that flow, it was celebrating white people's prosperity. And the next clip showed you that they have that prosperity because of the denial and the exploitation that black people experience. That situation hasn't changed.
All right, let's move on to the next part here.
When we foolishly maximize the minimum and minimize the maximum, we sign the warrant for our own day of doom. It is this moral lag in our thing-oriented society that blinds us to the human realities around us and encourages us in the greed and exploitation which create the sector of poverty in the midst of wealth. Again, we have deluded ourselves into believing the myth that capitalism grew and prospered out of the Protestant ethic of hard work and sacrifice. The fact is that capitalism was built on the exploitation and suffering of black slaves. And continues to thrive on the exploitation of the poor, both black and white, both here and abroad. If Negroes and poor whites do not participate in the free flow of wealth within our economy, they will forever be poor, giving their energy, their talents, and their limited funds to the consumer market, but reaping few benefits and services in return. The way to end poverty is to end the exploitation of the poor, ensure them a fair share of the government services and the nation's resources. I proposed recently that a national agency be established to provide employment for everyone needing it. Nothing is more socially inexcusable than unemployment in this age. In the 30s, when the nation was bankrupt, it instituted such an agency, the WPA. In the present conditions of a nation glutted with resources, it is barbarous to condemn people desiring work to soul-sapping inactivity and poverty. And I am convinced that even this one massive act of concern would do more than all the state police and armies of the nation to quell riots and still hatreds. And the tragedy is that our materialistic culture does not possess the statesmanship necessary to do it. Victor Hugo could have been thinking of 20th century America when he wrote, "There's always more misery among the lower classes than there is humanity in the higher classes."
You know, it makes me so happy to go deep into this speech. And also last week we you know when we covered the drum major instinct, just to show the diversity and like depth of intelligence of Dr. King and his analysis of the problem, you know, because normally, I mean, Dr. King is just kind of known for that "I have a dream" speech, you know, and I remember even as growing up, you know, I was told, you know, that Dr. King, I wasn't told about this side of Dr. King at all, you know, and it was only from, you know, working with you and learning about the Invaders, you know, and being a part of this, the new Invaders, like you guys call it. So it's just really brilliant, and everything he talks about is exactly what we should be talking about now.
Yes, yes. The irony of standing here today and looking back is that I'm not really looking back. I'm looking straight ahead, and I see the tragedy of another Trump election. At the same time, I look at Biden and I see the possibility of hope, a way of addressing, because there's no opportunity on the other side, because we just lived through 4 years of that. And as I said previously, Corona has shown that there's no sympathy for the poor. There's no empathy for what is happening to other Americans. See, this is not like Vietnam, you know, America versus Vietnam. This is America in America. And we've allowed in this country more people to die than died in the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Desert Storm, all of those wars that have taken place since World War II do not equal the number of people who died in any of those wars. And this is just to a pandemic, something that could have been lessened to a great degree. I won't say could have been prevented to where no one died, but we certainly didn't have to suffer through what we're suffering through now. And these numbers are going up. We may see 300,000 people dead.
When Dr. King quotes Victor Hugo and he says that there's more misery in the lower classes than there is humanity in the higher classes,
Yes.
you know, it kind of gives me shivers when I think about how much that implies, what is going on right now. And I mean, we see repeatedly also, you got hurricane relief, that there was no relief by the government. It was like
Right.
Common Ground Initiative, Malik Rahim organizing people, and all of these beautiful movements that have gone on, that Black Power has fueled, has always been helping the situation and doing what needs to be done for the people.
No, government should step in and do that kind of job. People can help and volunteer, but it's the government's responsibility. That's why we pay taxes, and when you look at the level of poverty in America, it has grown, not lessened. Even though we have all the resources that America has, the level of education, the financial system, that in itself should mean that everybody experiences a higher level of existence. But we're actually in worse shape than we were in '68.
All right. With that, let's move on to the next part.
We must also realize that the problems of racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power. We must further recognize that the ghetto is a domestic colony. Black people must develop programs that will aid in the transfer of power and wealth into the hands of residents of the ghetto so that they may in reality control their own destinies. This is the meaning of new politics. People of goodwill in the larger community must support the black man in this effort. The final phase of our national sickness is the disease of militarism. Nothing more clearly demonstrates our nation's abuse of military power than our tragic adventure in Vietnam. This war has played havoc with the destiny of the entire world. It has torn up the Geneva Agreement. It has seriously impaired the United Nations. It has exacerbated the hatred between continents and, worse still, between races. It has frustrated our development of at home, telling our own underprivileged citizens that we place insatiable military demands above their most critical needs. It has greatly contributed to the forces of reaction in America and strengthened the military-industrial complex. And it has practically destroyed Vietnam and left thousands of American and Vietnamese youth maimed and mutilated, and expose the whole world to the risk of nuclear warfare. Above all, the war in Vietnam has revealed what Senator Fulbright calls our nation's arrogance of power. We are arrogant in professing to be concerned about the freedom of foreign nations while not setting our own house in order. Many of our senators and congressmen vote joyously to appropriate billions of dollars for the war in Vietnam. And many of these same senators and congressmen vote loudly against a fair housing bill to make it possible for a Negro veteran of Vietnam to purchase a decent home.
Incredible.
We arm Negro soldiers to kill on foreign battlefields, but offer little protection for their relatives from beatings and killings in our own South. We are willing to make the Negro 100% of a citizen in warfare, but reduce him to 50% of a citizen on American soil. No war in our nation's history has ever been so violative of our conscience, our national interests, and so destructive of our moral standing before the world. No enemy has ever been able to cause such damage to us as we inflict upon ourselves. The inexorable decay of our urban centers has flared into terrifying domestic conflict as the pursuit of foreign war absorbs our wealth and energy. Squalor and poverty scar our cities as our military might destroys cities in a far-off land to support oligarchy to intervene in domestic conflict. The president who cherishes consensus for peace has intensified the war. In answer to a cry to stop the war, it has brought tauntingly to 1 minute's flying time from China, to a moment before the midnight of world conflagration. We are offered a tax for war instead of a plan for peace. Men of reason should no longer debate the merits of war or means of financing war. They should end the war and restore sanity and humanity to American policy.
Yeah.
Incredible. You know, since just to go back to the topic of the tarot, the last card that we were talking about was the card of the nameless or death. And this card is the next card in the Path of Illumination. And this card, I think it's important to talk about this right now. It's Curtis Mayfield in this card. And here we see him with these two jugs of water. And in this, in the tarot, the water is a symbol of love. And here you see Curtis Mayfield, you know, giving water to the parts of his life, to give love to the parts of your life, the parts of society that need love and care. And in doing this, we gain balance, we gain temperance, you know. And I feel like the beautiful thing that Black Power did to so many people, and the effect that it had on other indigenous cultures all over the world, was that, you know, we decided to give care to our own people and give love and attention to the problems. And this created a beautiful harmony and balance within the communities, which was then squashed by the superpowers.
Well, we definitely need love, you know, and the way the terror brings it to us is a way that's easily understood. You know, I came into the whole terror thing through you, and because of the use of black faces, which is something that I hadn't thought about. And the thing that's most important in using black faces, that's a form of love, because we are perceived as not deserving of love. Because if we were seen as deserving of love, then the harsh reality that we face on a daily basis would not be the primary way we are dealt with. And from my standpoint of view, in the 400, I talk about it being a story of love. And it is the love that we expressed for each other. Even during slavery, we were able to give love and receive love from each other. And to me, that's the only way we were really able to survive, because had we allowed slavery to make out of us what slave masters were trying to make out of us, we would have actually hated each other. And it was because of once we were emancipated, it was that love that allowed us to build families and build communities to progress as much as we were able to.
I feel like music has so much to play in that too. That I mean, gospel music, for example, just was all about love conquering hate and conquering, or taking away the pain and the sting of reality. And I mean, I wasn't. Your mom actually wrote a gospel song, didn't she? Back in the day, that got kind of popular, called Two Wings.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing of blues, R&B. It's love. I mean, those songs that were created, even though we were in pain, we were living through a period of desperation, we still were able to express love through our music, to support each other. And it's that kind of renewal, because I know when I was a kid and first coming into really understanding about love and partying and having fun, that's what it was about. It was about love, and some of those tunes, they don't get old. I listen to them today and it's like hearing them for the first time. So Curtis Mayfield, he was one of the best, man. When he did People Get Ready, that was like a call from the wild for us to really get it together, man. It really was like a spiritual, you know what I'm saying? Not just an R&B, but it was like being in church, because everybody that home that he had in there, everybody identified with that song.
Amazing. All right, so shall we go to the next clip?
And so we are here because we believe, we hope, we pray that something new might emerge in the political life of this nation, which will produce a new man, new structures and institutions, and a new life for mankind. I am convinced that this new life will not emerge until our nation undergoes a radical revolution of values. When machines and computers, profit motives and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. A civilization can flounder as readily in the face of moral bankruptcy as it can through financial bankruptcy. A true revolution of values will soon cause us to question the fairness and justice of many of our past and present policies. We are called to play the Good Samaritans on life's roadside, but that will only be an initial act. One day the whole Jericho road must be transformed so that men and women will not be beaten and robbed as they make their journey through life. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It understands that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. A true revolution of values will soon look uneasily on the glaring contrast of poverty and wealth. With righteous indignation, it will look at thousands of working people displaced from their jobs with reduced income as a result of automation, while the profits of the employers remain intact, and say this is not just. It will look across the oceans and see individual capitalists of the West investing huge sums of money in Asia and Africa only to take the profits out with no concern for the social betterment of the countries and say this is not just. It will look at our alliance with the landed gentry of Latin America and say this is not just. A true revolution of values will lay hands on the world order and say of war, this way of settling differences is not just. This business of burning human beings with napalm, of filling our nation's homes with orphans and widows, of injecting poisonous drugs of hate into the veins of peoples normally humane, of sending men home from dark and bloody battlefields physically handicapped and psychologically deranged, cannot be reconciled with wisdom, justice, and love. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death.
You know, this reminds me of the recent court case that just happened with the Purdue family, who were responsible for the opioid epidemic. I don't know if you heard about that, but they got no jail time, and
Right.
were the cause of millions of and ruined lives. It's quite frightening. How what he just said, rings so true. And especially, I mean, you're a Vietnam War veteran, and I'm sure you have many experiences of people, coming back from battle who just were destroyed mentally.
Well, I look at his statements. Well, today, I look at the results or the impact of the coronavirus pandemic as the new normal. We're not going to be able to go back to the life and the times that we had before the pandemic. I don't care what anybody says. That world is dead. And I think this is what Dr. King is alluding to in this last clip about the need to create new institutions, new thoughts, and new ideas about where we're going as a country, who we're going to be as people. And to me, that's the new normal. We are a different society. As I said previously about Black Lives Matter, the way that young white kids have filled the streets to support, not just support Black people, but to support justice, to support right, to support the idea that everybody deserves the same level of humanity, the same level of prosperity, at least the same opportunity to try and gain that level of prosperity. So what Dr. King is talking about here even though he spoke about it in 1968 or 67, with it was so reflective of today. It's like he was, clairvoyant and had precognition and could recognize what was coming, and again, tarot is not fortune telling or anything like that, but it gives us that idea that life is what we do going forward. It is how we can improve the world. It gives us different ways of looking at life as opposed to the kind of philosophies that we grew up with. Me, I grew up as a Christian, and I had only one way of looking at the world, but to negotiate the kind of existence we have today, you have to be able to see the world in a different way.
And on this note, actually, I'd like to show card number 15, which is the next card of the tarot. That's Devil, right? And this is the Great Screaming Jay. And I feel like the card before is talking about, love into your life, into the aspects of society that need it to care. And I feel like it's a really amazing next step where we go from that balance that we gain from helping each other to the enjoyment of the absurdity, and this card is to show the appreciation and laughing from the inside, from the gut, and it's also the card that teaches us to create without fear. And I feel that's a very important thing that we need to discover within our own selves, is that we don't fear what we create. Nowadays, a lot of artists, or in all aspects of work, you're afraid to create something that be away from the norm. But I think like right now is exactly when we have to be creating things and to not fear what we create and to go forward.
Yeah, that's what in terms of the new normal, that's what that's about. The way I think about it, that you have to get away from being afraid of what the reaction may be to what you see yourself as being creative.
I feel also that in the cards, the Black Power Tarot, I really saw that there were so many people, like the people that are included in the deck, who were able to follow a path of illumination despite everything against them. And I feel like the path of illumination from the tarot hasn't changed since like the 1400s, and it still applies so much in helping find what it is that we really need to do and how to move forward. All right, so let's go to the next clip.
So what we must all see is that these are revolutionary times. All over the globe, men are revolting against old systems of exploitation, and out of the wounds of a frail world, new systems of justice and equality are being born. The shirtless and barefoot people of the earth are rising up as never before. The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light. We in the West must support these revolutions. It is a sad fact that because of comfort, complacency, a morbid fear of communism, and our proneness to adjust to injustice, the Western nations that initiated so much of the revolutionary spirit of the modern world have now become the arch anti-revolutionaries. This has driven many to feel that only Marxism has the revolutionary spirit. Communism is a judgment. And in a sense, communism is a judgment of our failure to make democracy real. and to follow through on the revolutions that we initiated. Our only hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and go out into a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal opposition to poverty, racism, and militarism. With this powerful commitment, we shall boldly challenge the status quo and unjust mores, and thereby speed the day when every valley shall be exalted, and every mountain and hill shall be made low, and the crooked places shall be made straight, and the rough places plain. May I say in conclusion that there is a need now more than ever before for men and women in our nation to be creatively maladjusted. Mr. Davis said, and I say to you that I choose to be among the maladjusted. As my good friend Bill Coffin said, there are those who have criticized me and many of you for taking a stand against the war in Vietnam and for seeking to say to the nation that the issues of civil rights cannot be separated from the issues of peace.
You know, I find I hear throughout this whole speech, I hear a lot of kind of despair in his voice. Do you sense that too? In compared to other speeches?
Well, yes. I think he had come, like, as I said, if you look at where he is now in the world, people he thought was on his side, that he could always count on, have really turned against his program, if not him personally. And I know where he talks about sitting in darkness, those people who were in darkness have seen a great light. That, you know, you have to, once you see the light, once you understand what that is, you have to choose to be in darkness from then on. You may sit in darkness, but you will never be ignorant of the truth ever again. And I talk about that in the 400 because that particular passage I quote for that reason, that we've come to 2020 understanding life. We're educated. We know what life is really about compared to 200 years ago. So today we are doing the things that, when I say we, I'm talking about a society. We're doing the things that we know from the past don't work. We know from the past that the harm they cause, but yet and still we are pursuing them like it's something, like it's a new theory or something like that. So I can understand his despair. I can understand him struggling to try and wake people up to these facts. And this is the frustration that I experience in my efforts to, and I know you do, because we are both working on social change and social justice, like the water problem around the world. You know, when Viva Conagra made me the ambassador of water on your recommendation, you know, I really didn't understand the water problem. But once that happened, I looked at it and I could see that, hey, this is a preventable problem. It's like the rest of the environmental problems. These problems are preventable, and we know they're preventable, but the desire to hang on to the economic advantage of coal and fossil fuels is so great that even though we know better, we still choose to do harm to the environment.
This would be a nice time to show the next card in the tarot. This is the Tower, and originally the concept behind this is the monolith that you see there. It's a reference to the monolith that was in the film 2001 by Stanley Kubrick, where it was this thing that came from space that landed. You know, that was and I think of Black Power in some way as being this thing that came from space. And what you see here is Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley, and Bo Diddley's falling on his hands, but Chuck is doing the duck walk. But it's about how Black Power was this thing that came into from somewhere else, from space, and that forces you to do a cosmic dance. You know, it forces you to go beyond the what people expect, to burst through those constructs, and you know, and sometimes, you know, like there's a storm above the monolith there, that the storm will come, but in that storm coming, you build it. You know, it might rattle the whole building, but then you build it up even stronger than before.
Well, you know, in terms of the monolith coming in from outer space, that was the whole concept behind the Invaders. You know, Dunny Delaney, who created the whole Invader mythology, so to speak, he was watching, there was this TV program called The Invaders. And the theme behind that was these were creatures from outer space who came to Earth, and they came to Earth with the idea of making this their world. And so Dunny identified with that as being something Black Power was trying to do, and I identified with it from the same perspective. So for you to take that concept and put it into Black Power Tarot was really great, because it gives the whole Black Power and the Invaders, which were Black Power, the same philosophy and metaphor.
It's funny too, because my first band as a teenager, we were called the Space Shits. So, and in a lot of ways, I mean, of course,
did they come from outer space?
Well, we all came from different backgrounds. You know, we had a Filipino Jew, we had a Chinese American, you know, Italian, Scottish, and me, the Indian. But for us musically, you know, it was rock and roll that saved us, and it was us interpreting rock and roll, and that's how we found our own freedom and, you know, our path of illumination. So yeah. it's all interstellar, and yeah, that's really beautiful. All right, let's go to the next clip.
I want to say to you tonight that I intend to keep these issues mixed, because they are mixed. Somewhere we must see that justice is indivisible. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I have fought now too long and too hard against segregated public accommodations to end up at this point in my life segregating my moral concern. So let us stand in this convention knowing that on some positions, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And on some positions, it is necessary for the moral individual to take a stand that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because it is right. to our nation tonight, we say to our government, we even say to our FBI, we will not be harassed. We will not make a butchery of our conscience. We will not be intimidated, and we will be heard.
We will be heard.
Yeah. That whole speech, man, it is incredible. To listen at someone who spoke as long as he spoke without notes, and were able to make the coherent argument that he made throughout, hitting major points, and then illustrating how those points tie into everyday existence. I really admire his ability. He was something else.
He was, definitely. And one thing I really admire too about the Invaders, it's how different you and Cab and Kobe, were, but united in this effort. Kobe, his parents were in the civil rights movement, and he spent his teenage years spending more time with Dr. King, and then when Cab and you got into the whole thing, or started your own thing. It's I find it really fascinating how you were the one that had the bravado and to jump up on the table and yell out the message, or train the young invaders to take action. It's an incredible story, and I really feel very privileged to be a part of the retelling and the correct telling of this tale.
It's like there's a writer's trick, that one individual, it's very difficult to show, say, the three different sides of the invaders in one person. So what a writer does is create three personalities to portray each aspect of that one individual, because in writing it's easier to do that than it would be trying to explain how one person could flip, from this kind of personality to another kind of personality to another kind of personality, And so the Invaders, to me, were that one body in terms of an organization, but for it to really be effective, it needed those three different reflections to actually address the different aspects of what we were trying to do as a group, as an organization, and be effective.
And I just wanted to talk about one experience that we shared. I remember when we were in Holland, when the Guess Who Festival flew you in to do the or flew us both in to do the Black Power Tarot exhibition and stuff. And I remember the hotel that we were staying at, there was this plant. It was a decoration, and it was cotton, like dried cotton tree with the bushels of cotton. And you told me you turned pale as a ghost, and that's it's hard to believe with someone of your complexion. But no, you were really it sent a shudder down your spine, to see this cotton. And I remember asking the people at the hotel to remove it because it was really offensive to you, and when they did, and then I stole some of it actually. And we did a ritual to break the cotton together with our bunch of friends.
Well, like I say, when we started this session, and you go through after the parade, they start to show the real life of Black people. See, most people, they got this fantasized idea about what that life was like. Most of the things they think black people were singing in the cotton field and dancing, and all that. But it was misery. Those bowls, each one has a spine sticking out. So you have to develop the technique of being able to grab those five, because it's five bowl, get your fingers in between it and pull the cotton out. Because if you leave cotton in, that means you got to go back in there and get it again. And each time you do it, there's a chance that one of those spines are going to stick you in your hand. And at the end of like I say, you got to develop the technique, because if you don't, your hands are bloody at the end of the day. And you got to pick those things out of your fingers, and you got to still go back the next day. I don't care how sore your hands are. So it's not romantic in any kind of way. And just to think about it sometime. And me, I left the cotton field, for completely, because see, once we moved to Memphis, I still used to go over in Arkansas during the summer because there wasn't anything to do to make money. And in the fall on the weekends, I'd still go to the cotton field and pick cotton in order to have money. So, that whole experience was not romantic at all. It was dire necessity. And that's what that beginning of that At the River I Stand really represented the misery of black people as opposed to the opulent lifestyle of white people who really didn't even give a care about what it took for us to produce that cotton that they're celebrating and what we had to do to survive it, to be able to feed your family and things like that. You really did. I mean, nobody enjoyed that.
And we're finally reaching the closing of the show, but one really great film that just came into my life. I mentioned it earlier about the heroin problem that was in New York in like the early 70s. And it was actually a doctor from Montreal and his son. They were acupuncture specialists. And Dr. Mutulu Shakur, the father of Tupac, actually went and learned the acupuncture and brought it over, with the Young Lords, a Puerto Rican Black Power group, and they were actually doing this really successful, and they created the first detox program in a hospital in the Bronx. And anyways, this film is absolutely fantastic, and we got the permission from the director to show the clip. So thank you, John B, again for a wonderful wonderful time. And next week we got John B back. We're going to be talking more about the garbage strike and the invaders. And so we're going to conclude with we're going to show you right now the trailer of Dope is Death, a film by Mia Donovan. And we want to ask you all out there we're going to try to help and free Dr. Mutulu Shakur, who is still in prison right now over all these bullshit, false accusations. And thank you again. And let's see each other next week.
Growing up in the South Bronx, when the heroin epidemic really hit strong, I got used to seeing the addicts. At one point, there were 100,000 addicts in New York. So I wanted to do something.
It was the Black Panthers and the Young Lords. They actually were the first ones to bring acupuncture to the South Bronx.
They tried the acupuncture and they saw that it did take the edge off. And so they kept on coming every single day.
Corporate doctors at that time saw everything that we were doing as a threat.
And we got the people who we detox and the community involved in political work. So they all became activists. So we became an issue in the South Bronx and a threat to the establishment.
We were calling for free quality health care for all. That was the bottom line for all of this.
I think it's important to realize that the pioneers are always the ones targeted as the fools and the naysayers and all the rest.
7 people from the radical underground were indicted.
We were living in a revolutionary period.
Have you or your group organized last night's burnings?
We organize people. If people burn, they burn.
In 1968, united under the banner of Black Power, young people were taking their revolutionary new politics to the streets of America.
The leadership of the Invaders was folk heroes in the community because, they stood for what was right. They walked the talk.
They were just cool dudes, They were progressive to me. They were like ahead of their time.
We all had the same problem. The question was how to do something about it.
That became the Invader organization.
Now we saw the violence by some of the young people who are excellent students of this very sick society of ours.
The city of Memphis has willfully attacked the black community. If Dr. King is going to come in here, he's going to have to come in here and analyze the situation and meet the needs of black people here.
I met with one of the leaders of the young militant organization here in Memphis. We don't have any problem with many of the young militants who talk in terms of violence. Our method is to communicate with them.
I don't give a crap what America says. America is just a part of humanity. And humanity is not ever going to make a change about anything without what? Some disruption, some actual disturbance.
The sun is shining, but the cold don't walk.
Economic power for poor people was one of the main reasons that Dr. King got assassinated. He was talking about poor people power.
I've been waiting, anticipating for the likes of things to change. Look out my window, I see the moon go. Looks like another night has ended.
met with militants in Memphis and afterwards felt that they had found some way that they could all work together.
To me, represents much more than just a time to eulogize. His campaign for the poor must go on.